Rusting and forgotten. The early 911S team comes into play when a Porsche is nothing more than a heap of metal. No matter how poor its condition, they can keep any vehicle from ending up in a car crusher. Faithful restoration can take several years. The result is an extremely valuable classic car with 0 mileage.
A fully restored car starts from 300,000 euros up to 1.5 to 2 million euros.
Faithfully restoring the radiance of times long gone, down to the last detail. That is the philosophy of the professional restorers from Wuppertal. Their favorite is the legendary Porsche 911 sports car. Hardly anyone in the world can restore this iconic car as perfectly as the mechanics from Germany. Early 911S in Wuppertal. Everything here revolves around the Porsche brand. The yard is full of old sports cars from Zuffenhausen, from drivable to just about scrap. The specialists restore, rebuild, and repair all air-cooled Boxer models manufactured up to 1998. Complete restoration often takes over 1,000 hours of work. That comes with a hefty price tag. Restoring a 911 costs at least 200,000 euros. At the end, the customer receives a car with a rare #1 rating, flawless, including a 2-year warranty. He's the boss here. In 2006, former marketing expert Manfred Hering turned his passion into his profession.
I think the old 911 actually reflects my personality a little, because I love understatement. I love the design. I just really love the subject of old German cars, and that's how I got started.
Today, early 911S owns the second highest number of sports cars made in Zuffenhausen between 1965 and 1998 in the world. Only the Porsche Group itself owns even more. The workshops in Wuppertal contain around 200 fully restored Porsches. 100 projects are in progress, and another 300 body shells are awaiting their rebirth in the High Bay warehouse. Building up such an extensive stock took 15 years.
I bought up vast quantities of bodies. I traveled through Europe. I said to the old workshop owners, I'd like that car, I'd like those parts. But if you ever give it all up, my concept is actually that my team and I will come to you and we'll clean out the garage or the workshop within a week. We'll take over.
A black van arrives in Wuppertal. The freight on its cargo bed is a genuine rarity. A Porsche 911 built in 1965 in the special color brown. The early 911S team found the rare vehicle in the US state of California, bought it, and imported it to Germany. At the time, this brown 911 was a test vehicle for the press, which is precisely what makes it so special. An external specialist is on hand to provide an initial assessment.
So, Mr. Hering, you promised me something very special today.
Exactly.
Jörg Kusnik is an independent appraiser who conducts an initial assessment, accompanies restoration, and ultimately issues a valuation report.
What's special about the car is that it's the 1965 press vehicle, which is also why we immediately bought it when we found it in America. It's been in America for at least 30 years, and it's the second 911 press car from 1965, special color brown, with leatherette and pepita in the interior. It has the chassis number 300330, so it's the 330th 911 built in 1965.
So an absolutely unique vehicle.
Exactly.
Accompaniment by an expert is very important when such rare and therefore valuable vehicles are involved. The appraisers conduct extensive research into the history of the car, check the quality of the restoration, and finally issue a kind of certificate of authenticity with an estimated market value. Jörg Kusnik inspects the body and interior in detail. Many of the original parts, such as the seat covers, are missing and have been replaced. The original steering wheel was also replaced at some point, and it's hardly surprising that the engine is at least the second one. The former test vehicle has suffered a lot throughout its life. There isn't a lot of insulating material left either. Nevertheless, appraiser Jörg Kusnik sees a lot of potential in the 1965 rarity.
It's almost certainly going to be a gem, and particularly in terms of its value, a real one-off that you wouldn't come across again.
Exactly.
The standard vehicles lie in the 300,000 to 400,000 range when they're fully restored. In this case, the vehicle's rarity could actually bump that up by 50 or even 100%, because such vehicles are highly sought after by collectors, of course.
So, after complete restoration, this vehicle could be worth as much as 800,000 euros. But whoever buys this car will be taking possession of a minor celebrity.
It's really the one that was presented as the Porsche in all of the car magazines and on the TV. Don't forget we only had the public channels back then, and I think that's a massive added value. Added to that is the color, brown, which is virtually impossible to find. Looking at it like that, I think it was a very good decision to buy the car in America and import it into Germany.
This is what this brown 911 looked like in 1965. Bearing the license plate number SUX 911. Porsche, still a relatively young company at the time, provided it to journalists for test drives. There were a total of 2 press vehicles back then. The other has disappeared and probably no longer exists. The original vehicle documents show that this car is actually the press vehicle in the film. The American registration is also available along with a brochure, which is important for the appraiser.
Here we have the basic documentation. That's very valuable, of course. I'm inclined to say we should really wear gloves to take a look at it. Here's the master data, so that we can start our initial research. I'm pretty happy about that. It doesn't happen often.
The motor vehicle expert will check the authenticity of the documents in historic and other sources. Only then can he submit his final assessment. This is how the former press Porsche will roar again at some point. But that's going to take a while, because whoever orders a project in Wuppertal today has to wait around 3 years for their fully restored Porsche. Turning the ignition key not only starts the boxer engine in the rear, but also a journey back in time. The new owner can then forego modern assistance systems and high-tech equipment.
There's no hydraulics, no driving aids, no power steering. There's no dynamic handling program that tells you you're driving too fast. There's no ABS and no ESP. It's pretty much back to the basics. You can tell what the car wants to do, and you have to react and act accordingly.
Instead, the air-cooled one-offs offer pure driving pleasure, at least for experienced drivers. Before being handed over to the customers, each Porsche is run in for 1,000 kilometers. In Wuppertal, that's also Daniel Neumann's job. He knows the classic cars from Zuffenhausen inside and out.
It's a very puristic vehicle. Even the modern racing cars are fitted with so much control electronics and the like that you pretty much don't hear any of that in the vehicle any longer.
The high quality of an early 911S restoration is demonstrated by this rarity, a 911 TR from 1968. The 230 horsepower racing car only weighs around 900 kilos. It has a price tag of over 1 million euros. The Press 911 is now being tackled in the workshop. The vehicle is being disassembled into its individual parts. Over the next few days, the two mechanics will remove its engine and transmission, and also the entire interior, until only the bare shell remains. Removing the 50-kilogram front axle poses a particular challenge. Dismantling such extremely rusty cars is often a matter of patience and requires lots of experience. Having disassembled hundreds of vehicles beforehand, the two technicians have learned which screw connections they have to release in which sequence. Subsequently, the front axle, which is over 50 years old, is lying on the pallet. What looks like a pile of scrap is still valuable. All of the removed components are restored as far as possible and renewed with previously overhauled original parts. To do this, the employees in Wuppertal need to precisely determine the condition and function of the components. This steering gear is so rusty and dirty that it first needs to be thoroughly cleaned. But that isn't done by hand. To do this, early 911S has purchased a special tool, an extra-large washing machine. Here, the parts are cleaned using water vapor over a period of hours or days. For the steering gear, that means spending 30 minutes in the washing machine at 70 degrees. Workshop manager Daniel Neumann now takes a look at the condition of the body and the floor assembly. The latter is as full of holes as Swiss cheese. It needs a lot of work.
The vehicle we have here will take around 600 to 1,000 hours for the entire bodywork.
The floor assembly has already been extensively patched up before and can no longer be saved. Obtaining an original replacement part from the 1960s is virtually impossible, so a new floor assembly will be used.
Finding an original 1965 floor assembly somewhere is like winning the lottery. It's as rare as hen's teeth to find an original somewhere in a wooden crate. There may be one somewhere on the market. Someone might still have one lying around, but you can also use a new one.
Also, because in the end, the car has to be absolutely roadworthy again. The two mechanics are now preparing to remove the 2-liter boxer engine and its transmission. First, all fluids have to be drained from the unit and disposed of. In the meanwhile, the workshop manager removes the steering gear from the giant washing machine. The component now looks fairly acceptable again and can be checked to see whether it works. But it quickly becomes clear that over 5 decades have left their mark.
Normally that should be far smoother.
But that's no reason for the Wuppertal specialists to panic. The old front axle will be repaired and will then be fully operational again, like this axle unit that has already been restored to its former glory. The 77-man team restores around 100 air-cooled Porsches each year. Whoever wants to call such a perfectly restored classic car with 0 mileage their own needs a lot of patience and money. Depending on model and condition, restoration takes several years. The brown press car has a long way to go. Right now, its engine is being removed. The mechanics release the retaining bolts in the engine bay and then lower the 184-kilogram 6-cylinder engine onto a lifting truck. The 130 horsepower engine is severely dilapidated over decades spent overseas. It's doubtful whether the assembly still runs at all. The famous press car's engine is no longer the original and has already been exchanged before.
The great thing about the Boxer engine is that we can exchange or repair each individual cylinder if it's damaged. It's very complex work, but it's worthwhile.
It remains to be seen whether the Boxer can be saved. Ultimately, it should look like this one that's already been restored. The engine department employees disassemble each engine and painstakingly check each individual part. What can be saved and what has to be replaced is decided here.
Rebuilding the engine is relatively quick. We need about 6 weeks from disassembly to completion.
Again, the primary objective is to keep as many original parts as possible. An apprentice will completely disassemble the engine over the next 2 days. First, he removes the 2 triple carburetors and takes a first look inside the engine block. After removing the cylinder head cover, the mechanic sees the full extent of the deterioration.
Something must have been living in the engine, or the engine has been stood in the woods for a long time. Often mice have been living under the covers of an engine in a vehicle that's been standing in a barn for a long time. It's nice and warm and dry underneath.
And how do they get in there?
They hop in here through the fan wheel.
Daniel Lohmeyer turns the Boxer engine onto its side and unscrews the spark plugs. Although they still look okay, they will be replaced with new ones. The rust has also made its mark on the transmission. The former Porsche demonstrator arrived in Wuppertal with a kilometer reading of 97,555. The gears and shift assemblies have also done a lot of work and were then not moved for over a decade. After the initial diagnosis, it looks like the transmission can still be saved in this condition. A new or rebuilt transmission unit would cost 20,000 euros. In the adjacent cubicle, a colleague opens the crankcase. The crankshaft and its connecting rods are also completely dismantled and then overhauled or replaced with new parts. Rebuilding the engine is a really complex job because a Boxer like this consists of thousands of individual parts, all of which have to be removed, cleaned, and checked. After 6 weeks of work, the Press 911's engine will once again be left looking resplendent with 0 mileage. The Boxer engine is named after the special way in which it operates. Its pistons move towards one another like boxers.
In the Boxer, the pistons move towards one another, whereas a V-engine, it's asymmetric. Roughly one piston is at the top and the other is at the bottom in that system. And the Boxer always runs like this. And the second or third cylinder banks run consistently. So we have a really consistent mass and smooth engine running, despite the engine's broad design.
This Boxer has already been overhauled and can leave the engine department. Despite all routine, the specialists are always proud when they've succeeded in breathing new life into such an old engine. This blue Porsche is already longingly waiting for its revised power plant. The mechanics push the assembly with its flange-mounted transmission into precisely the right position beneath the vehicle, and then bolt it in place. It only takes them a couple of minutes.
Yes, great.
The early 911S team specializes in the air-cooled Boxer engines. These units are relatively uncomplicated to repair, run very smoothly, and are robust.
We have an engine from a customer that's now done 650,000 kilometers. I think that says it all, really. What modern car has such a robust engine? It's been serviced, but it's almost certainly not been completely overhauled. I think that's really incredible for such a car. Once the engine has been restored properly and it's really warmed up, it lasts a lifetime.
The sound of the air-cooled boxer engines is also partially responsible for establishing the legendary 911. Since the first Porsche 911 was introduced in 1963, its boxer engine has also characterized the design of the iconic sports car. Only the flat design of the boxer engine enabled the striking, gently descending rear to be realized. Manfred Hering and his wife Sarah have also succumbed to the lines of the 911. Outstanding design and unusual architecture are their passion. Their home is a villa designed by the architect Richard Neutra back in 1967. Like the iconic sports car, the building was also extensively redeveloped by the couple and restored to its original condition as far as possible. And how could it be otherwise? Old Porsches also play a starring role here. Manfred Hering and his wife have converted the villa swimming pool into a showroom for the iconic sports cars. It's currently home to Carreras, built between 1974 and 1976.
It's simply a much nicer atmosphere up here with the customers. The property is really lovely, and it's a completely different experience, because it's fairly isolated. It's more intimate than down in the valley in public. That's also very important to some customers.
With 6 appropriate vehicles, the theme in the showroom is changed every 6 months. Exclusive customers are also received here, because discretion plays a part in this business.
You can't really say we have customer A or customer B. We're not like a modern car dealership. The customer also has to make an appointment. It's not like we have walk-in customers in that sense, and we have a lot of very famous customers, which is why we attempt to keep things very intimate and protect their identities. So we'll never say that's the CEO of such and such, or that's the sheikh of this or that country. Essentially, we'll never name names. Nor do we have our photo taken with a new customer and then tell everyone online how great it is that early 911S is building up a collection for him or her. Of course, that would be great, but ultimately, people don't want that, and so we respect their wishes.
The fascination of Porsche. Sarah and Manfred Hering are living their passion for the aesthetics of the 1960s and 70s. The showroom in their villa is therefore aimed at presenting not only historic sports cars to customers, but also the architecture of that period. Early 911S has an enormous stock of classic vehicles. 200 Porsches are parked in its halls, and around another 300 unrestored bodies are in storage. This requires a well-organized network of buyers and dealers that scour the globe for cars and ensure a constant and exclusive supply.
We buy lots of cars with special colors in Japan because they were very bold in the 90s. We buy a lot of vehicles online after a great deal of research. We look to determine what's special, what might be a Porsche prototype. I love press cars and I love police cars. We buy all of these in really vast quantities.
This model in signal red demonstrates just how rare some of the vehicles in Wuppertal are. It's one of the first 901s ever built, even before Porsche was forced to rename the model the 911. Its price is exorbitant and secret. The original Porsche has already been restored in Italy, but very poorly, as the paint measurement shows.
1.14 millimeters.
That's a lot.
Normally, the paint on a car like this has around 200 micrometers, but this one has 1.140. That's a hell of a lot for a vehicle like this one here.
The Italian colleagues have botched things elsewhere too. The rare vehicle only appears to have been restored well at first glance. But a lot has been filled and painted over. Not exactly a professional restoration job. In this condition, the unique car is worth far less. The paint on the fender's actually peeling off already. The painter peels it off carefully with a knife to assess the extent of the botched job.
If you look into the fastening points for the window frames and trim strips from up here, you can see there's lots of filler. We can assume that this much material has been used in the whole vehicle, so we have to start from scratch and restore it from the ground up. Its condition is probably no better than the press vehicle we showed you before.
That's still being disassembled next door. The two mechanics are removing the interior. The steering wheel is followed by the seats. They were reupholstered by the previous owner sometime during the 70s. The in-house upholstery team will restore them to their original as-delivered condition. The two mechanics also carefully remove the windows. They would hinder the bodywork specialists later on, and in the worst case, could possibly get broken. Then the over 50-year-old instruments, such as the speedometer and tachometer, follow. All of the fittings have to go. The former press vehicle's two rear seats are removed last. Finally, all attaching and installed parts are removed from the early 911's self-supporting body. Its restoration can now begin. Once it has been faithfully restored, the car will be worth around 800,000 euros. This price is due to its extraordinary history as a frequently photographed and filmed press vehicle. Four employees push the bare shell into the assembly shop. They have to be very careful because it's full of valuable one-offs. They mustn't damage them by accident. Even a small scratch can quickly add up to a few thousand euros. The body shop is where 10 specialists weld, grind, and straighten the historic body shells. Not just anyone can do that. Everything in this workshop is done manually, just like it was 50 years ago. The experienced employees teach the younger ones the old techniques that are no longer used in modern body construction, or that are carried out by robots. The master bodywork specialists take a first look at the rookie's metalwork. They only decide how the team is to proceed after a thorough appraisal. The press Porsche is lifted up so that its underbody can be assessed. The initial inspection confirms that it's going to be a long process, but not as difficult as first thought.
Well, there's a lot to do, but it hasn't been messed about with. That's always very pleasant for us. No recognizable major accident damage, none of the commonplace botch jobs. At some point, these were just old cars. Anyone messed about with them, and that's why we're pretty happy to get one like this.
Something that isn't apparent to a layman is immediately noticeable to an expert. The tiny screw holes indicate that a complete fender has been replaced.
Here you can clearly see the original fender. The early models have the 4 screw holes for the C-grill, with no way of adjusting at the 4 corners. On the left, the fender has been replaced because of rust or accident damage, and the replacement has the newer screw connections. The old C-grill has been positioned badly. It just doesn't correspond to the original or our standards.
First of all, the bare body shells are clamped on a straightening bench. Heavy-duty tools then come into play. The hydraulic draw liner, the so-called dozer, develops a tensile force of up to 15 metric tons and pulls misaligned frames and body parts straight again. The rear of this 911 TR from 1968, which was driven in races, has received several severe impacts and is completely warped. The special straightening bench is equipped with 16 rams. If the car is straight, they fit precisely into the 16 support points located in the body. If not, the bodywork specialists have to work on the structure with the dozer until everything is in position again. The men move the hydraulic arm into position at the rear and secure it on the straightening bench. The 15 metric ton tensile force can only act correctly on the rear of the race car if the bodywork specialists position the dozer at the correct angle. The vehicle is so warped that they now have to bring all of their experience into play.
You can clearly see that this car has been in multiple accidents. On the straightening bench, the damage is easy to see now. We have numerous measuring points where the vehicle has to fit 100% later on. Here on the left engine mount, you can clearly see that it fits, and it suffered a more extensive accident here at the side. It clearly doesn't fit there. At the side, you can see the kinks up there. They're also from the rear end damage, and I need to pull all of that out so the vehicle is 100% straight again afterwards.
The dozer slowly starts pulling on the bent body. Millimeter by millimeter, the rear moves into the right position. A real feat of strength. The ram doesn't fit yet. With powerful hammer blows, the specialist relaxes the deformed metal body.
Now we've got it under tension. It's already moved over a bit here. And now we're going to take the tension out of the kinks caused by the accident by setting all of the kinks again, or the weld seams, or where it's been spot welded. We're now going to reset it all a bit so that it remains as it is now. Otherwise, it always moves almost all of the way back again.
Straightening accident damage like this can take several hours. The master bodywork specialists need a lot of experience and, above all, good three-dimensional imagination. Time and again, they attempt to picture how the accident could have happened and the direction in which the forces acted.
We try to reproduce the accident, which is why we're pulling in this direction where we think the accident occurred. That means that either the car had an accident at the rear or it skidded into something backwards. So we aim to work in the opposite direction.
Today's goal has been achieved. The support point is back in its position prior to the severe accident. To repair the 1965 press vehicle, the upholstery shop is now tackling the seats. The 6-person upholstery team faithfully processes all interiors and is restoring the interior of the old Porsche to its new condition. Once more, each part that can still be used is painstakingly restored and then installed again. 130 hours of manual labor are invested in reprocessing a complete interior. However, new seat covers are always installed. Suppliers produce the fabrics based on original patterns that are over 50 years old. Restoration is not only concerned with appearance and originality. The safety of the aged parts also has to be guaranteed.
For someone who doesn't know any better, it looks pretty bad, but it can be refurbished. That isn't a problem.
The horsehair and felt interior quickly emerges. The upholsterer separates the cover and spring assembly from the old seat shell. The specialists will remove the rust, grind, and paint it before new padding is installed.
It's in poor condition, but we can still save a lot of the parts. There's a Bonnell spring assembly in it, horsehair padding, and linen beneath. The linen is to prevent metal-on-metal noises, and the spring assembly has had it, but we can replace all that.
The spring assembly is crucial to the occupant's sitting comfort. If it's too soft, the driver has no support when cornering or on poor surfaces. This is why the upholsterers in Wuppertal fit modern versions.
You can clearly see here that this is a reinforced version. The reinforcement is stabilized here at the front, and this one's like this. It all becomes pretty wobbly after a while because it's carrying 80 to 90 kilos of body weight.
The upholsterer finally finds a reusable part.
The wood is still on down here. We can use that. There's nothing wrong with it. We'll take it off carefully. Unfortunately, the frame looks all right, but it isn't. Someone else has re-welded it here, and then it's too uncertain for us. We'll replace that. We have them in stock. You can see that the welding isn't very professional, and the risk is just too high. So we'd prefer to completely renew it.
The upholsterers put all of the individual parts that can still be used for the subsequent restoration into crates. Next door, two colleagues from the electrical department are assembling a wiring harness for the 911 press car. Assembling it just as it was 50 years ago is a laborious manual process. For this, the experts use a plug board they've built themselves as a template. The wiring harness in the 1965 Porsche is relatively short and simple compared to modern models. Nevertheless, it still takes the electricians 2 days to produce the 15-kilogram harness. What is transported by robots in modern automotive manufacturing can be comfortably carried in a crate here. These are all of the cables that were fitted in a Porsche 911 from the 60s.
There's far less in the early models than in new vehicles. Nowadays, we're talking kilometers. It's really not much in the early models.
The two technicians position the finished wiring harness and feed it through the body. The route through the various slots and openings is predefined and has to be adhered to exactly. Otherwise, the harness wouldn't be long enough. They also have to make absolutely certain that the sensitive cables aren't damaged during installation.
In part, it's more complicated on older vehicles because of the number of repairs, bent-up panel corners, and so on. They're actually relatively easy to install in vehicles that have been restored.
A protective sleeve is drawn over the wiring harness. It protects the sensitive lines from mechanical and environmental influences.
If you compare the length of wiring harness we have here, a modern car is pretty much that in the door alone. It's a massive difference.
It doesn't even take the experts an hour to install the entire wiring harness. This yellow 911 SR from 1967 is now ready for final assembly. The S variants of the 911 were always the pinnacle of the model series. More power, more speed, and above all, less weight. Porsche stood out through innovation even back then. Since the 60s, for example, the doors and engine hood have been manufactured from lightweight GRP, a milestone at the time. Fully restored, this car will have a price tag of around 300,000 euros. But getting to that point will take a few more hours of work. A mechanic is fitting the rubber seals and the bumpers. The seals are always completely renewed at early 911s. They protect the bumpers from water penetration and soiling, and therefore from rust. Working on the old vehicles is still something special, even for the experienced mechanics.
It's actually best on the F models when you can apply something here, and then you have a relatively straight line to the tail lamp later on. That will turn slightly in a minute so that we have a proper line when we've tightened it, and then it looks really tidy.
Later on, a 2-liter boxer will be roaring in the rear, which will get really hot. The mechanic therefore installs a Kevlar heat shield on the rear cover panel. It's one of the few parts that aren't found on the original from the 1960s. This Wuppertal upgrade protects the material, and especially the paint, from excessive stress. Improvements that increase the longevity of the valuable vehicles are unlikely to pose a problem for any of the buyers. In the body shop, the restoration specialists are taking care of the final details. The team invests up to 1,000 hours until a body is perfect again. All of this is done manually using techniques that hardly anyone else masters these days. They don't simply apply filler to uneven areas, dents or holes, but painstakingly smooth out the damaged areas using liquid tin. It requires more effort than filling, but it's also more durable. After hardening, the apprentice doesn't remove the excess material with a machine, but by hand using a special plane. Exactly how the workers at Porsche used to do it. So it's a matter of honor for the bodywork specialists to do it the same way. A strenuous job, but this technique offers a number of advantages.
Of course, you could also remove the excess tin with a grinder, but you always run the risk of producing an uneven surface, one that's wavy, for example. This way, it's far easier to work with a bit more feeling and to restore the surface accordingly.
The work on the body is the most laborious and time-consuming part of restoring a classic car. But what happens when certain parts can no longer be saved? This driver's door can't be restored to its original condition, and it's first put to one side. A replacement is needed, so the bodywork specialists proceed to the gigantic warehouse next door. Here, thousands of doors, fenders, fittings, and engines are stored in an area covering 8,000 square meters. Searching for the right driver's door can take up to an hour and a half, because every part that has ever been fitted in a 911 can be found here. This employee is reassembling a freshly restored seat. He and his colleague have invested 30 hours of work in faithfully restoring the spring core, upholstery, and mechanical system to their original condition. The seat is intended for a particularly rare vehicle, a 1967 soft window Targa in Irish green. Restoring its interior has taken 300 hours of work, but installing the seats only takes a few minutes. With a price tag of around 350,000 euros, the vehicle is then good to go. This 911 variant bears the name Targa thanks to its special roof construction. To be approved in the USA in the 60s, cabriolets required a rollover bar for safety reasons. The Targa bar was born. While searching for a name for the model, Porsche focused on its racing successes at that time. The name was therefore provided by the long-distance Targa Florio race on Sicily, which Porsche won multiple times. From 1965 until today, the safety cabriolet has been a firm part of the 911 family. Only a few thousand units of the first 3 generations were built, which is why these rare cars are so popular.
At some point, the global economic crisis occurred. But after that, a lot of people discovered that you can invest money in old 911s. So whereas a really good project used to cost me 10,000 euros to start off, the same project now costs 70, 80, 90,000 euros. Accordingly, it's a good capital investment.
Restoration is rounded off by technical inspection at early 911S in Wuppertal. Before the specialists hand over the soft window Targa to its new owner, a GTÜ inspector checks all of its functions again in detail.
Can you switch through the lights, please?
Ja.
Yes. Left turn signal.
Links. Rechte Seite.
Right side. Wonderful. Brakes.
Und den
And reverse gear. Yep.
Jawohl.
He then turns to the 911's rear. The engine number data has to match the new documents. The Porsche is raised on the lifting platform. The inspector also appraises the roadworthiness of the underbody, the suspension, and the axles. His list is long and covers 200 points that are checked in detail. The inspection can take up to 3 hours.
Tire size 165R, 1581V, that's correct.
Many of the cars that have been restored at early 911S are from overseas. So that the TÜV badge can ultimately be issued, all safety-relevant parts also have to be approved in Germany.
These tail lamps are approved for Europe and have an ECE test symbol, so no conversion is required. The headlamps have an ECE test symbol. Like many other things, they're new, and the turn signals are also designed for Europe. Wonderful.
So far, the specialist hasn't found any faults with the Targa that's been re-imported from Texas. If that remains the case, there's nothing stopping him from issuing the badge.
The vehicle was imported from the United States, so we have no German documents. We have the original US documents that are used for identification with the chassis number, the origin, and the initial registration. We'll write up the expert report for this and then issue an individual operating permit. That's stamped and recognized by the vehicle licensing office, and then the car can be registered in Germany.
The re-import is in flawless condition, and the inspector issues the documents. Other projects are still years away from this point. Only the body of the 1965 Press 911 remains. The mechanics have removed all of the other parts and sent them away for refurbishing. There, the components will be completely reconditioned. Today, classic car expert Jörg Kusnik is back again. He is accompanying the restoration. Later on, his assessment will determine the classic car's value.
That's still a really good basis. The seat shells back there are normal, that isn't a problem. The most important thing is that the center tunnel isn't destroyed by corrosion. But I think you discovered something concerning accident damage.
Exactly.
A body panel that had been replaced.
Exactly, we've discovered we have 2 different fenders.
During their appraisal, the body department specialists discovered that the left fender grille is of a more recent date.
You can't see much of the accident, so it couldn't have been too dramatic. It could also have been corrosion, so we'll just have to see.
That will have been the main point. The shut lines looked good right from the start.
Yeah.
The appraiser also checks the vehicle's background. Later, he has to certify that this car really is the historic press demonstration vehicle.
Happily, we've already completed the first step. The certificate that I requested from Classic Data. That's the basis with which we then discuss and establish all of the sums.
Exactly.
What is certain is that the police aren't searching for it, so it isn't a stolen vehicle. And something else that's very important is that this chassis number only exists once according to Classic Data's documents. At least for Europe, that means it's certain we won't have any counterfeiting problems or difficulties that a similar cloned vehicle might exist here. In view of its history, I think this is almost certainly going to be an impressive vehicle.
This means that the first obstacle has been crossed to proving that it really is the car from the advertisement and could therefore ultimately be worth 800,000 euros. Manfred Hering and his employees have a lot to do over the next few years. Besides the press Porsche, 400 other Porsches are waiting in the warehouses to be brought back to life. The restorers from Wuppertal returned the air-cooled 911s to their original condition in painstaking manual work, as if they had just come off the assembly line over 50 years ago. The team can see the former iconic sports car from Zuffenhausen under every rusty body, and with passion and dedication, attempt to restore each vehicle to its original as-delivered condition. With 0 mileage,